And we know that prostaglandins are these inflammatory mediators that are released during the inflammatory process. They increase, again, something very, very similar to histamine in that they increase blood flow, right? They cause vasodilation and increase in cap permeability. They also cause chemotaxis, but they're a large part of the reason why there is so much blood flow and edema at the site of injury, okay? Prostaglandins. The other thing that prostaglandins are responsible for is pain. So prostaglandins mixed with bradykinins. Remember we talked about those bradykinins are created way back in the vascular at the beginning of the whole process, right? And throughout the whole process. Prostaglandins and bradykinins together result in pain. Okay, so here's down here, we kind of have where these prostaglandins are sitting in our system. How do they get there? One of the biggest kind of creators or releasers or whatever of prostaglandin is this whole like arachidonic acid cyclo-oxygenase pathway. And don't worry, I'm going to explain it. It's actually not, it is complicated, but what we have to know about it for this class is not that complicated. So you remember how the outside of all of your cells is created by a phospholipid bilayer, right? So your blood cells, most of your cells are phospholipid phospholipid bilayer. So cellular injury causes this this phospholipase A. You don't need to know the name of that at all, but it causes this lipase to break down those phospholipids into arachidonic acid. This is a good thing to remember. It may or may not show up on your test, but it's really good to understand it anyway. So again, your phospholipid bilayer has been broken up into arachidonic acid. Through this cyclo-oxygenase pathway, and again, this is a very complicated like molecular chemical thing that's going on we don't have to know about. It creates or results in prostaglandin. It does this two different kind of pathways, splits into two different pathways. You have one pathway over here that uses the COX-1 enzyme to break up this arachidonic acid into prostaglandin and thromboxane. I wouldn't worry a whole lot about thromboxane, to be honest. It may show up. I don't want to say don't look at it, but I wouldn't focus too much on it because they can only ask you so many questions, and it's not really what we're focusing on here. So the COX-1 enzyme, right, is breaking down this arachidonic acid into thromboxane and prostaglandins. And again, prostaglandins are responsible for all that stuff we talked about earlier, right? There's a second pathway where the arachidonic acid is broken down by COX-2 enzyme into, again, prostaglandins. Now, there's all kinds of like other ways of classifying them in terms of where these COX-1 and COX-2 are located more and what, but I don't think that you need to know that for right now. I think just understanding this is kind of how our cells, or phospholipid bilayer of our cells, is broken down into this arachidonic acid and then further broken down into prostaglandins, which are going to have a huge effect on our inflammatory process, right? What's interesting is that I'm sure you know that your NSAIDs, certain NSAIDs block COX-1 or COX-2, right? And so remember when you're studying a pharm and it'll be like, oh, it's a COX-2 inhibitor or a COX-1 inhibitor. This is what it's talking about right here. This is where those medications are working. Your corticosteroids, like your general corticosteroids, your Dex and so on, those are working here on this action here, this phospholipase, so that it's not breaking down here, preventing it from breaking down here, which means it's not going to end up being prostaglandins. The NSAIDs are working here and here, there's a lot of arrows, sorry, to ensure that it doesn't break down into prostaglandins.